So what time does the 7 o'clock meeting start? 7 o'clock. So welcome to Position of Neutrality. Welcome to New Freedom. Who's here for the first time tonight? Anybody? Oh, good. A bunch of you. Good. First of all, welcome. And let me warn you in advance, you're liable to experience us just a little different than other meetings of other fellowships you may have attended. The primary reason that's liable to happen is that's what we intend for you to do. We expect that you will have a different experience here. What we do here, we've been doing for lots of years. We take a look at the suggested instructions for a step or so a week, directly out of this book, and we use this book in 12-step recovery. Why? Yeah, the process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work with addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances, yes? So the other thing, because a lot of you are members and maybe some of you are new members, so I want to tell you that your families are welcome here if you haven't been told that, because we like to see some family reunification and healthy events. Let them participate in your recovery, what it is you've decided to do to get your life on track. So bring them here. They can come to this, and they can also come to Chaplain Sam Lee's Recovery Church on Saturday. He opens the doors at 7. And Chaplain Lee spent 30 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections, so he's quite good at meeting people where they are, because the God he serves meets people where they are. So with that, we're going to roll in. All spiritual power is accessed by making a decision after an encounter. So we had an encounter last week, and now we're going to take a look at the decision. Yes? So in order to take a look at the decision, what we're going to need to do is go to page 58 in chapter 5 of our book, a little chapter called How It Works. How many of you have been to an AA meeting before? So you've probably heard this chapter. The portion we read in an AA meeting is, whoops, I didn't turn the ringer off. That's not good. The portion we read at AA meetings is the wrap-up of steps 1 and 2, leading us to a third step decision. Make sense? So we're going to go through that in detail and see if we can unpack it a little bit and you can find some instruction. They have promises and conditions and instruction throughout the book, right? So we're in chapter 5, How It Works, and they start out with a promise and condition. Let's see if you can identify that. It says, rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. What's the promise? And who's we? The first 100. And what's the name of the book? The story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. So they had experience with several thousand, and yet, even though we hopeless types don't have good odds, rarely had they seen a person fail who had thoroughly followed their path. Did you notice they did not say paths? There was over 100 of them. They didn't talk about their individual paths, did they? That's interesting, isn't it? Okay, so those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. So, have you ever asked yourself if you were a cannot or a will not? How many of you thought you were a will not until you found out you were a cannot? Sean's. Okay. So, what have we got to be honest with ourselves about? Remember, this is precise instruction. So what have they talked to us about thus far? 2 things, right? They've talked to us about 2 things. So let's go back to what the doctor opines about alcoholic types, men and women. I'm at the bottom of page XXVIII, Roman numeral 28. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Yes. How many people in here are sober tonight? Wow, a high percentage. That's such a good start. How many of you can sit here tonight and replicate that effect? Give yourself permission to go get that drink, get that script. Yes. Some of you are afraid to try. Is that because you already know you can? How many of you can feel that ease and comfort? They're going to talk about that ease and comfort. Okay. So the sensation is so elusive that while they admit it injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. How many of you have had more than one go at this? Did you see other people drinking and think, why not me? Using? Did you find out why not you? So what the doctor opined all these many years ago is people like me and perhaps you, I'm going to be restless, irritable, and discontent when I'm abstinent. Abstinence will not work for me. So I'm going to be restless, irritable, and discontent until I can again experience that ease and comfort that I know comes at once by taking a few drinks, a few hits. Anyone relate to that? Any of you remember your first day or days off of addiction? Remember how comfortable you were? So what the doctor is saying is without this spiritual experience, without this spiritual ease and comfort, these alcoholic types are in trouble. Okay, so can we own that about ourselves that might be true? All right, so let's look at the other thing they want us to be honest with ourselves about. Now we got to go to page 50. So we're back about the first 100 and the first several thousand. And I'm on the bottom of page 50. Here are thousands of men and women worldly indeed. What do they mean by worldly?
Well-educated, traveled, etc.
Yeah, does that make sense? Sean doesn't have all the answers. He has all the answers for Sean. But does that make sense? Worldly just means they weren't ignorant. They knew what was up. Okay? They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power and to do certain simple things, there's been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. So how many of you could use such a revolution? How many of you have been sober a while and still periodically need a revolution in the way you live and think? Hence, manner of living, right? Not a one and done, a manner of living. Okay? So it says, in the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. Huh. Sounds like a replacement for the ease and comfort that I've been looking for out there. So what they found, even though half of them were atheists or agnostics, is if we allow ourselves through this process to come to know this power, he will express himself through us, a well of ease and comfort within us, power, peace, happiness, a sense of direction. Regardless of belief, right? Because we learned last week, half of them were atheists or agnostics. But this experience changed their mind. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, so then it says this happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. What are those simple requirements?
The steps.
Yeah, I mean, in the simplest terms, does that make sense? I mean, I had the encounter in 2. I've had the flow of the Spirit in 3. I know that my consciousness of that has been obscured by calamity, pomp, and worship, and sometimes I have to search fearlessly. So right now, my very first step of action that I need power to do is look inward and get armed with the facts about myself. And I don't want to do that. I'm afraid to do that. So I'm going to have to do 4 through 12 because that's the simple requirements for me. There's no requirements for you, but there are now requirements for me because I want to grow spiritually. Make sense? All right, so we're honest about those 2 things. So now we're back to constitutionally incapable of being honest with ourselves. I need ease and comfort. I've experienced it when my sponsor sat down with me, pointed out to me the experience I was having was in fact God, the power which is God. He pointed that out to me as I felt it. I was nearly dead, so I didn't feel much. I'm not exaggerating, I was. But the reality was I knew something was vastly different. I could feel it, and I was told that was God, and that was enough to start trying to improve consciousness, because you didn't have to. I mean, I'm a junkie. If you tell me I can get higher, we're going to give it a go. Okay? All right, so there are such unfortunates, constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They're naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. So, first of all, if you think you're that guy and you haven't tried the manner of living, you're not that guy. Because rarely have we seen a person fail who is thoroughly followed path. So if you've had the encounter is the path. The path is the power, and the power is the path. Right? At first we think it's a process, but eventually we realize because we were powerless, the power was not only the process, but the power to carry that out. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. So, all we got to do is keep stepping. Don't let your fear of amends keep you from doing an inventory. And don't think because you made a 9th step approach that you're not going to go out and show others, because that's the big amends. The reason you do 9 is to get fit enough to go into that dope scene and pull your brother or sister out. Got it? Okay. So their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. So how many have been around long enough to have met those people with grave emotional and mental disorders? Got a picture of them in your mind? Have you seen them? How many of you have figured out it's you? Sometimes it takes a minute, but we never feel like we belong until we somehow learn we belong, right? How many of you went to public detox on the way here? You see a lot of people down there you didn't want to be like? They tell you were there as a patient and not an observer? How many of you went to some other institutions in the state? Should be a lot more hands. Did you see a lot of people down there you didn't want to be like? They point out to you that you were there because of your conviction, not theirs? So we often find ourselves in places we don't feel like we belong. And that's partially true, because as a child of God, maybe you don't belong there, but it's preparatory. Right? Okay. So it says, our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. Not what it was like. I heard that for years. That's not what they said. That's why I did the inventory, to find out what I was like, what happened, what I'm like now. That better be revolutionary, because the way I was tries to medicate himself to death. Make sense? How many of you thought you could hold on to your old way and be new? Were you right? Me either. Okay. All right, so if you decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. So we can't go any further in the step process until we discover whether we want what they have. Who's they? The first 100. So we're going to have to look to them and not to someone in the modern rooms, yes? So now we're going to have to go to page 25 and weigh ourselves against that. So I'm in the middle of page 25. And it says, the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we've had deep and effective spiritual experiences. They use that word effective, and they use the word effect, and they want you to quit conceptualizing and start experiencing. God, the subject of my experience, not the object of my belief. Make sense? Okay. So which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. Remember when they asked us if we needed a revolution? Now they got their revolution. How many of you raised your hand and said, yep, need a revolution? Okay, this is precise instructions, regardless of belief, of how to get that revolution in the way we live and think. Yeah? Okay? So it says the central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. How many of you can think back to your days in using and tell me what you were absolutely certain about. I was absolutely certain if I could get to the trap house, I could feel different. Not much else. These people, atheists and agnostics, and believers dying in their addiction, now witness to us from the grave, but in this book, that they were absolutely certain that God entered their heart and now lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. Does that sound like something we might want to pursue? Because absolute certainty is what I need. That's why I kept going back to the dope house when I knew, it's not, I used to hear it in the AA rooms a lot, doing the same thing, expecting a different result. You ever heard that? If you're an addict like me, I had no expectation of a different result. This is going to suck, watch. So that is, I have an appalling lack of perspective. I have the inability to think clearly. They called me out in here. Okay, so he has commenced to accomplish those things for us, which we could never do by ourselves. So I'm going to go from there back to the original text we started on. So, do you need certainty? Are you even willing to believe that whatever encounter you had can be improved upon, that there is a power greater than you? Okay. Then you're ready to take certain steps. It's really important that we don't move you any quicker than, because you're not going any further than the power's taking you. Right? You already admitted to powerlessness, so you either lied back there or you're lying now if you're able to do it on your own. One is true or the other. Okay, so our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, what we're like now. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm already dead. So I'm down that we're ready to take certain steps, and now we're looking at the step process, and they tell me right away, at some of these, we balked. How many of you can already think of the one you balked at? Some of you don't like 4. Some of you don't. How many of you don't like 5? I'll write that shit down for days, but I ain't telling nobody. How many of you don't like 8? Or did you look right past 8 to 9? You'll never do 10 or 11 until you've had an encounter in 2, because no one seeks to improve consciousness of a concept. Because consciousness is the awareness of being aware, right? How many of you are just afraid to work with others? That's the big amends. That's the manner of living change. So we got to outgrow that, but don't let your fear of engaging others keep you from taking the step in front of you. Okay? All right. So we thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Why? Where's the main problem with the addict, the alcoholic? Centers in the mind. Where do your old ideas come from? It's an old idea factory. How many of you, when you've been blessed with a spiritual awakening, working with others? Some people in here working with people. How many of you have learned that as you go out to serve others, they show you what your old ideas are? You're never going to unpack till you go show somebody else. Okay, so remember that we deal with alcohol. Cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it's too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is? Power. That's really good. You guys are so good from week to week. That one is power, right? But we use the word God interchangeably so that people that have problems thinking about it, no one denies that we need power to live. Many will deny we need God to live, but God is what we agree upon is the name of this power that we seek. Yes? Okay. So where it says, may you find him now, where are we going looking? Deep down inside. How many of you can relate to not wanting to look in there? One of y'all can give me the answer, right? Just tell me what I need to do. The answers for you are in you. Just tell me what I need to do. The answers for you are in you. Pisses you off, doesn't it? But it's the truth. How would anyone who hasn't been where you've been know what it is you need to do to get where you're going, other than the one who lived there, lives here, and lives there. Okay, so let's see what they said about that. Half measures availed us nothing. How'd they learn that? They employed a few half measures. How many of you have employed a few half measures? How many of you have yelled at somebody you were working with for employing half measures? You forgot that you employed half measures. That's part of the process, right? So we stood at the turning point. We asked His protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. I always want to call your attention. Over the years, we've started talking about sitting in the seats as being in the program. And I know people get mad at me, Joe, why you... Because people think sitting in the seats is being in the program, and they die of addiction because no one ever introduced them to the power that could have saved them. And we have an obligation to bear witness, because that's what I agreed to do in 3. So I want to call your attention. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. It does not say, and it has never said, here are the meetings we attended, which are suggested as a program of recovery. So I just like to point out that we have badly messaged those of us, and not to be an ass, but sometimes it would be good to be clear, because we're confusing people. Any of you remember your first day or days in recovery? And people just telling you all the shit you needed to do? And you're like, I hope no one I know sees me.